Hey everyone, welcome to the Chicago Report. I'm Paris Schutz. Political violence in America taking a dark new turn tonight. Popular right-wing influencer Charlie Kirk is dead after being assassinated at an outdoor rally in Utah. President Trump ordered flags to fly at half-mast and delivered the news this afternoon on social media saying, quote, "The great and even legendary Charlie Kirk is dead. No one understood or had the heart of the youth in the United States of America better than Charlie. He was loved and admired by all, especially me. Now he is no longer with us. Melania and my sympathies go out to his beautiful wife, Erica, and family. Charlie, we love you." And Republican U.S. House Speaker Mike Johnson, as well as authorities involved in this investigation, spoke out as well.
I'm very saddened for the Kirk family. I know his wife and parents found out about this. You know, obviously he's away from home. He's here in Utah. They find out by a police officer that visits their home. That's tragic. Nobody wants that.
This is detestable, what's happened. Political violence has become all too common in American society, and this is not who we are. It violates the core principles of our country.
And a lot of condemnation across the aisle today. Kirk is a native of the northwest suburbs, originally from Arlington Heights, graduate of Wheeling High School, attended Harper College before starting the Turning Points USA Political Action Committee at only 18 years old, before turning it into a nationwide group that has been strongly allied with President Donald Trump and strongly influential in talking to college students and younger generations about the conservative movement. And now we are joined by our expert panel to weigh into this very, very dark day for America and where we go from here. We are joined by Aaron Del Mar, who is the head of the Cook County Republican Party and a lieutenant governor candidate on the Republican ticket. Mr. Del Mar knew Mr. Kirk all the way back in his high school days. We're also joined by Robert Pape, head of the University of Chicago Project on Security and Threats, and Ross Rice, longtime former FBI special agent here in Chicago and a current instructor at DuPage County. Thanks, all of us. We're going to spend the whole half hour talking to you guys. First, Ross, a little bit of confusion as the FBI director tweeted out that a suspect is in custody, but then officials at this press conference this evening said a person of interest. What can we glean? What do we know right now for sure?
Well, I listened to the press conference this afternoon, and it appears that they do have what the local authorities in Utah termed a person of interest in custody in connection with the shooting. Now, the director went a little farther, saying that a suspect was in custody who was responsible for the shooting. Certainly, he got inside information that wasn't released to the public at that press conference. It might have been a little premature for him to put that tweet out or make that post or that statement, but hopefully he was accurate. And I just think if accurate, it sends a great message about the efficiency of law enforcement and how quickly they were able to respond to this tragic situation.
In fact, they apprehended one man and then let him go, saying he's not the suspect. But Ross, I want to stick with you for an instant. Is there anything based on what we've seen and what we know that suggests some kind of security breakdown? Should there have been more of perimeter security at an event like this on a college campus with hundreds, if not thousands, of students there?
Well, you can always second-guess yourself, and you can always second-guess the authorities. The big discrepancy or the big difference here, Paris, is Charlie Kirk was not a public official. He was not an elected official. He had his own private security team, which was on site with him, and they were in coordination with the campus police at the university where he was speaking. Whenever you have an outdoor event, the security envelope expands exponentially. And we saw that last summer in Butler, Pennsylvania, when there was an attempt on the life of then presidential candidate Donald Trump. When you're outside, it's almost impossible to control every aspect of the security. And from the pictures I've seen, he was in an open plaza area. It appears that the shot was fired from a rooftop of a building a couple hundred yards away. So that gives you an idea how big an area they would have to have cordoned off and had security for. Could they have done better? Should they have done better? Well, in hindsight, yes, that appears to be the case. I just don't know if it's feasible or not. That's the problem.
Hard to second guess, especially with all the variables. Aaron Del Mar, you knew Charlie going back to his high school days in the northwest suburbs. What can you tell us about him, what he meant to the conservative movement, and what he was like as a person?
Today's a very sad day. I knew Charlie when he was in high school. He had just started talking about doing Turning Point. I was a young, first-time politician, being a councilman in the village of Palatine. He'd come up to me and said, "Hey, Aaron, I'd really like to do an event and a fundraiser. We're going to have a golf outing." And I thought, wait, what a dynamic young man, outgoing and personable. Certainly, we want to support your event. And, that was kind of the opening caveat to Turning Point. And all the success afterwards, being at the RNC convention, having a speaking opportunity in 2016, being more involved in expanding his campus footprint through Turning Point USA, as he kind of grew and grew and grew and had a bigger impact on young people at universities and colleges all throughout the United States. None of those groups would have had an opportunity to have conservative values and be a part of the conservative movement if Charlie Kirk hadn't taken that first step and started going and reaching kids at their own home turf at these colleges and universities.
Certainly, and that's what he was doing when he unfortunately died today. Robert Pape, you have been writing about political violence. We've had you on a number of times talking about this very issue as it seems to just continue to escalate here. Where does this moment today fit into the broader escalation of political violence? How big of a flashpoint is an assassination of a very influential and polarizing political figure?
So the assassination of Charlie Kirk is likely to be a watershed moment in our already radicalized politics. Literally, I was listening to Charlie Kirk's interview with Mark Halperin, which he did yesterday, literally listening to the podcast when my wife called me to tell me the news even before it hit the New York Times. This is a man who was beloved by millions, especially in the Republican Party, especially if you're under 30. This is somebody who is a major figure in Republican politics, much more important than your average Republican congressman, for example, even many of Republican senators. This is somebody who's right at the heart of the MAGA movement. This is a tragedy on multiple levels. However, it's also, I'm sorry to say, as your question indicated, predictable that an event like this would happen. In June, I published a big op-ed in the New York Times entitled, "We're on the brink of major political violence." This was my third warning op-ed, essentially, in the New York Times since December. So this is not something that I've come to lately or just as a result of, say, the Minnesota shooting. I've studied political violence for 30 years. As you know, Paris, for the last 5 years, I focused very heavily on American political violence because we are in what I call the era of violent populism, where we are in a rising trajectory and wave of political violence that's now been going on for years. There are reasons for it. This is not just going to fade away on its own. And I've been warning about this since I published my first piece about this in April 2021.
In fact, Robert,
we are now in the middle of violent populism.
And basically, you've studied other countries where this has happened, and you've told me many times about the very shocking and striking parallels to what's happening here. The history does sometimes rhyme. Ross Rice, from a law enforcement perspective, how should the FBI, how should law enforcement agencies treat events like this going forward, and the knowledge that political violence now seems to be here to stay, I think we can surmise?
Well, that's a great question, Paris. As far as the FBI is concerned, their responsibility is not as a protection detail. That's the Secret Service for limited federal officials. The FBI's role is to hopefully uncover threats that are credible, alert the intended victim and any law enforcement agencies that would be associated with an event, and prevent the attack from happening. In this case, that didn't happen for a variety of reasons, and the Bureau is now working with local authorities to further the investigation. It doesn't appear to me at this point that there's going to be a federal crime that was committed, although we don't know all the details. We don't know who did this. We don't know what their motivation was. We don't know if they were assisted by anyone else. And those are all facts that are going to come out in the days and weeks ahead, which could change the dynamic a little bit. But again, it's just your public officials, whether it's President Trump, Governor Pritzker, they can't live in a bubble. They have to be out in public, meeting with the public, meeting with their constituents. And every time you do that, there's going to be a risk of violence.
And terrorism, obviously, and I'm not saying that that's what this is officially designated as yet, but terrorism is designed to scare people and change behavior,
Sure.
and not succumbing to that is a big part of defeating that. But Aaron, you know, most of the reaction across the aisle today from public officials, Democrats who vehemently opposed him, Republicans who vehemently agreed with him, has been condemning political violence, although I think you see in some corners of social media folks already deciding to blame something on this or to justify it, and you know, bad obviously in both instances. But where do you think the country goes from here, given how much of a flashpoint this event might be today?
I think, you know, at the end of the day, 2 kids are without a father, a wife is without a husband, and a whole ecosystem of Republicans, conservatives across the United States, even across the world, are saddened by the political violence that took place today. And it's really unfortunate that you have so many people on the other side of the aisle that are using this, to your word, as a flashpoint to try to drive their own political agenda through. I could see some of our elected officials here, and even in Illinois, trying to blame Donald Trump and some of the people that were about Jan 6. I mean, that's our own governor saying those things. I think that we as a community, as the United States, have to remember that we were based on the First Amendment, and that is the freedom of speech, and we should be able to exercise this in a safe environment. Even if what we say conflicts with your own moral code or you don't like what comes out of our mouth, we need to be able to have those discussions, because that's what makes America great. You don't have to agree with me. I don't have to agree with you, but we have the right to be able to do it in a safe manner. And until we can find a way to get back to that, I think that we are going to continue to see things like this, and trying to use it to politicize one side or the other, I think, is just despicable.
I pray that those who hated what Charlie Kirk stood for will put down their social media and their pens and pray for his family, and that all of us will try to find a way to stop hating our fellow Americans.
Obviously an emotional Utah Governor Spencer Cox, Republican leader of that state, and of course the assassination happened in his state at a college campus there. I want to pick up from what we were left off talking about. Robert Pape, you've said to me many times, again, as we've discussed this issue of political violence, that the response from public officials has to be above partisanship, has to be above politics. It has to be a unifying message of no matter what you believe, we do not tolerate political violence. We cannot make that normal. Are you seeing that today, and can that sentiment last, or does it just take one prominent public official to start politicizing it and going down the road of blaming and demonizing the other side?
So you're seeing some of the good signs. You just saw Speaker Johnson, for instance. You ran that clip, and for years I've been advocating this for our political leaders, and there have been good steps in this direction. We're now at a new level, and what do I mean by that? We need all Democrats, governors, representatives in Congress at all levels to vehemently condemn political violence, not just once, not just send out a press release, but on video over and over again for weeks. We need all Republican leaders, this includes governors, members of Congress, the president, to urge restraint and to do this strongly on video over and over for weeks. We need them now to go beyond what you're just seeing, and we need this to become as important as their campaigns for running for office itself. In fact, their lives are on the line. You heard that they need to be in public. Well, we know, we've seen Republican town halls where it's been a bit feisty here. This is going to produce a tremendous amount of fear among our political leaders. This is also in the body politic going to produce a tremendous amount of first sorrow, and then that sorrow can transition into anger over time. And so we need to see that there is fear, there is angst, there is retribution. We're already in spirals. And the most important thing now over in the coming weeks is what I'm describing, which is concerted, serious efforts by all political leaders on both sides to do their parts to take down the temperature among their own constituents and not play the game of your constituent's worse than my constituent. If we turn this into a political football, the spiral will just continue.
All right, Ross Rice, based on what we know, and there isn't a lot we know, we should not jump to conclusions. Is it very apparent to you that this is likely a politically motivated shooting, that there couldn't have been, obviously the shot was intended for one person, it hit that person in a sea of 1,000 people, and that person is a very, a flashpoint of a political figure?
Paris, I would be shocked if the motivation turns out to be anything other than political. And at the press conference earlier today, we heard one of the speakers, I believe it was the governor, saying that that's exactly what we had here, a political assassination. It's a tragic event. Hopefully it was a individual acting alone without being aided or abetted by someone else. But again, it's going to be days or weeks before we know for sure who was responsible and what their motivation was.
And a lot of folks on social media jumping to conclusions, which we should caution,
sure,
is it's not a way to go here. There's no reward for getting more information first. It's getting the right information. Aaron Del Mar, conservatives are out today. I've heard a lot of them saying they feel like this is sort of weighted against them, that it's the left. But we do have to mention that we had the assassinations in Minnesota of the two lawmakers there that were Democrats. And then, of course, we had the attempted assassination of President Trump, attempted arson and assassination of Governor Josh Shapiro in Pennsylvania. Do you, as a Republican prominent official, do you see this as a both sides problem, or do you feel like it's targeted in one direction?
I can tell you, as somebody who's a candidate and who's an elected official in Illinois, even on the Republican side, it definitely gives you pause. I think that we've always had people that have emailed us, called us, given us threats. I've received death threats. A lot of my colleagues have as well. But I think we take them a lot more seriously now. I think after this situation, I think that this is going to be something that's going to change the way that politics is done across the nation. In regards to what side, yeah, you can make arguments for either side of Democrats or Republicans that are getting engaged. I think that, to Robert's point, we need to be taking care of our side. They need to be taking care of theirs, and we need to damper down the high level of derogatory comments we make and that we throw at each other. I mean, a lot of people wanted to come out earlier and blame Donald Trump for this whole situation, but then you still have J.B. Pritzker that's out there talking about, never in his life has he called for mass protests or mobilization, but we cannot allow Republicans a moment of rest. It's coming out from both sides to a certain faction. But we have to tone down the rhetoric in certain ways, and we have to be careful about the words that we speak, because you can see today that it clearly has consequences.
Certainly. And Robert Pape, social media is such an accelerator, and we just have to kind of state the obvious that these social media algorithms are built on divisive rhetoric that can be, quote-unquote rage bait, rhetoric that gets people angry or scared, because that's what keeps them on these social media websites, unfortunately. Can you speak to this issue of social media and what can be done? Because I see this all the time. There are actors on social media that know full well what the algorithm, how to boost their own brand by divisive content, conspiratorial content, and the algorithms reward that.
So my research shows that social media is a part of the problem, but it's like throwing gasoline on the fire, but it's not the fire itself. Social change, big social change, is what's often underneath big political violence in countries. We see this all around the world. We've seen it in our historical past. The big social change we're going through as a country is we are changing over this 20 years from 2015 to 35, a historic shift from a white majority democracy to a white minority democracy. And these kinds of huge demographic shifts in other countries have been known to produce highly radical politics, because changes like that, where you go from, again, one group is the majority to now the minority, you end up having fantastic changes in politics as a result. And therefore, you can have a gigantic part of the public that wants to stop that change from happening. Think of that as the supporters of Donald Trump and the right. Not all of them, but some very strong ones. And then also supporters on the left that want that to keep going, that change, or they want to make it even faster, open the borders. Well, this is the taproot of what's really occurring. It's why this era of violent populism I've been describing has been growing for years. It's why you have the meteoric rise of Donald Trump and the animus to Donald Trump. And also this, we have to expect, will go on probably for another 10 years. So this is not just a social media phenomenon, which is why deplatforming people has not slowed this down. Certainly. This is not simply, social media makes it worse, but we need to understand the actual taproots of this. And this is important for the leaders on both sides of the political aisle to understand what it really means to be in this era of violent populism in the United States.
Yeah, good point. A lot of cultural demographic shifts driving a lot of instability and uncertainty here. Ross Rice, you know, given the fact that rhetoric is escalated, we have a First Amendment in this country that we celebrate, and it's one of the things that makes us the most proud to be an American, is that we can criticize our government. We can go out and say what we want to say, what's on our mind, without fear of punishment. Do you fear a crackdown on that if public office holders are all of a sudden going to fear for their life with this freedom that we've been bestowed?
No, but you hit on a great point, Paris, and I'm glad you brought it up, and that's the rhetoric. And in my view, there are two factors that are contributing to the political violence and violence overall that we're seeing. One is the rhetoric that's coming out of Washington, that's coming out of Springfield, the terms, the phrases that are being used by elected officials to demonize and criticize their opponents. And then you combine that with what I will characterize as a mental health crisis in this country. And if you look at each of the incidents that have been discussed earlier in this interview, the people involved, in my view, had unaddressed, untreated mental health issues. And when they hear that type of rhetoric, that inflammatory comment, they become unhinged and they act in very inappropriate ways. And I'll bet you anything you want that the shooter in Utah is going to be determined to have some sort of mental health issue that's been unaddressed.
Well, I think you're all bringing up very pertinent points as factors here. We only have a few seconds, Aaron Delmar. Just a couple final thoughts on Charlie Kirk and his legacy.
You know, I think if you like Charlie Kirk, you don't like Charlie Kirk, you like his rhetoric or you don't. You know, he was a human being. He was a father. He was a husband. He was a leader. And today we should be mourning that for whatever side of the political aisle that you're on. I think that he has done some fantastic things. If you like what it is or not, but taking it from a grassroots organization and spreading it nationwide is an American success story that should be remembered. And I think that today, you know, America did not get better. I think today America got worse.